these waters but lost his boat in a bad gamble and fell into bitterness. Now, with the town's meager defenses, he sees a chance to hoard stolen supplies, bottled water, medicine, whatever he can get, to sell at desperate prices. Survivors speak of armed men patrolling on his behalf, seizing relief goods meant for the shelter. Fear seeps into every conversation. People are hungry and cold, unsure if official help will ever come. One afternoon, an elderly volunteer limps into the shelter, whispering about a hijacked aid truck. Maggie's hands shake as she realizes crucial medicine, insulin, antibiotics, painkillers, may have fallen into Hank's clutches. She looks at Charlie, eyes pleading, uncertain what to do. The local police force is stretched thin, and roads are blocked by debris. They can't count on quick enforcement. Charlie, who spent years avoiding any real responsibility, now finds himself thinking, I can't walk away again. If I do, who will help these people? Together, Charlie and Maggie organize small teams to retrieve supplies from the edges of town, ensuring they avoid Hank's men. They navigate battered streets, collecting stray cans of food, rummaging through the wreckage for anything salvageable. Each outing is fraught with tension. Any corner might reveal scavengers or dangerous conditions. Still, the volunteers persist, hauling back tarps, blankets, diapers, whatever helps keep survivors alive a bit longer. Charlie tries to shield Shadow from the chaos, keeping the pup safely tucked in the shelter when danger arises. But the presence of the dog has become a small symbol of hope. People smile upon seeing the wiggly tail or hearing the tiny bark. In times of heartbreak, even a little reminder of life can be enough to lift spirits. In caring for Shadow, Charlie also reawakens his own sense of purpose. At night, the wind rattles the shelter's loose doors. Lanterns burn low, and exhausted volunteers doze off where they can. Charlie, staring at the pup curled by his side, drifts into memories. He recalls the blaze that changed his life. There he was, uniform on, radio crackling with urgent voices, racing through thick smoke. He almost reached the child. Almost. But the floor gave way, and his partner yanked him back from the edge. By the time he regained his footing, the flames had claimed a young life. The guilt and heartbreak that followed drove him far from home, far from anything resembling normal life. Now, back in Cedar Bay, he sees parallels everywhere. The sense of helplessness in the face of overwhelming disaster, the desperation in people's eyes. Yet instead of giving in this time, he feels a growing resolve. He can't change the past, but maybe he can stop more suffering here and now. That realization steadies him. Tensions escalate when Hank Mercer himself visits the community center, strolling past volunteer-erected barricades. Two of his men stand guard behind him, arms crossed, giving off a menacing aura. Hank says he wants to distribute supplies fairly, but no one is fooled. Maggie confronts him, refusing his offer. Charlie stands beside her, silent but resolute. Hank's eyes narrow, studying Charlie's stance. In a cold voice, he warns that refusing him comes at a price. Then he and his men leave. Fear ripples through the survivors. They know Hank won't give up easily. Still, a glimmer of hope appears. A distant relief agency has managed to contact the shelter by radio, saying they plan to send a helicopter with vital supplies, food, medical kits, clean water. The entire shelter buzzes with cautious excitement. If this is true, it might alleviate the worst of their shortages. Volunteers band together to clear a nearby parking lot so the helicopter can land. They spend hours moving rubble and broken cars out of the way. Though exhaustion seeps into every muscle, they push on, imagining the possibility of real help. The morning of the helicopter's arrival, people gather at the makeshift landing zone. The day is overcast, sky tinted gray. Children sit on chunks of concrete, hugging each other, while parents pace nervously. Maggie and Charlie stand at the forefront, scanning the horizon. A growing rumble in the air announces the approaching aircraft. Relief mingles with tension. Will Hank show up? The helicopter appears, its blades chopping through the clouds. The pilot circles once, lowers altitude, and hovers. Just as it seems the landing will succeed, a sharp crack of gunfire rings out. Hank's men emerge, pointing rifles at the chopper, forcing it to pull up. Panic breaks out as bullets ricochet. Volunteers scramble for cover behind crates. Mothers shield their children. The pilot, desperate, keeps the helicopter in the air, uncertain whether to land or abort. Hank steps forward, weapon in hand, demanding that the chopper land under his control. Everyone feels the moment poised on a knife's edge. Charlie locks eyes with Maggie. He knows if Hank seizes these supplies, the entire town is doomed to further misery. He also knows that failure to act will condemn Cedar Bay to fear. Heart pounding, Charlie grips a broken metal pipe lying nearby. He waits for the right moment, then lunges at one of Hank's henchmen, knocking the gun aside. The volunteer crowd bursts into action. Maggie manages to kick away a fallen weapon before another of Hank's men can grab it. Some survivors tackle Hank, wresting the gun from his grip. Gunshots flare into the air, forcing the helicopter to bank sharply. Shadow, barking from behind an overturned barricade, reflects the collective terror. Once Hank is subdued, pinned down by furious citizens no longer willing to bow to intimidation, the pilot tries once again to land. This time, the chopper touches down successfully amid cheers and relieved sobs. Medical workers leap out, hauling crates of supplies. A wave of relief surges as the volunteers form a human chain to move the goods. Even the wind seems to ease for a moment, as if acknowledging the triumph of hope over despair. Hank curses and struggles, but he's outnumbered and disarmed. Once local authorities, few in number but determined, arrive, they take custody of him and his remaining men, ensuring that justice will follow. The days after the helicopter's arrival are filled with renewed purpose. With stolen goods recovered from Hank's stash and fresh resources from the relief team, Cedar Bay can finally care for its wounded, feed its hungry, and rebuild. Tarps go up over skeletons of houses, and debris is cleared from main roads. Teams of volunteers direct heavy machinery, removing the wreckage that once was. Bit by bit, the town breathes again, sustained by a collective will to survive. Charlie helps wherever he can, setting up triage stations, comforting those reeling from trauma, and making sure the supplies are well guarded against any remaining threats. In these acts of service, he feels the faint echo of his old life as a firefighter, rushing to people's aid, determined to protect. Yet unlike before, he no longer believes saving a life is a guarantee. He accepts that sometimes, despite all efforts, tragedy happens. Yet it is precisely in the face of that uncertainty that he's chosen to stay and fight. Meanwhile, Shadow, now bounding around with a playful spirit, has become a beacon of joy in the shelter. Children run after the puppy, squealing in delight. Adults pause to ruffle its ears, exchanging weary but genuine smiles. Maggie watches Charlie and Shadow from a distance, noticing how the once guarded man has started to open up. There's a softness in his eyes when he plays tug-of-war with the pup using a piece of old rope. When he catches Maggie watching, he offers a small, almost shy grin, a far cry from the haunted man who first walked in. Not long after Hank is dealt with, official rescue and reconstruction efforts ramp up. More volunteers pour into Cedar Bay from neighboring towns and organizations. Public works teams stabilize roads, restore partial electricity, and set up functioning water stations. The community center transitions from an emergency shelter into a hub for rebuilding. People from all walks of life come together to share meals, tools, and labor. In these